and I have noticed the airflow in this building is weird. The smell changes every day. So I'm getting some air cleaners to figure out, maybe it's my office, maybe it's air from other offices.
Yeah.
But when I first moved in, my friend Jesse Getz, I think he's over there. He's like, it'll be Arctic some days, it'll be Sahara other days. He's like, my office will be Arctic, your office will be Sahara. They got the little thingies up there to adjust the temperature, but he's like, just get your own air cleaner, get your own air conditioner.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let me just add in the screen here. So anyway, long way of saying, I apologize if it smells a little weird here. I'm trying to figure out what that is.
That's okay.
But anyway, so you will set up templates, forms and checklists, and you will create one as you have projects come in. You'll create one for commercial, listing template, whatever. And what the templates are is they're the standard pack of what you will probably need in terms of documents.
Right.
And then what you'll do is you'll say, you're currently modifying a listing template. Click here if you want to create a new listing transaction. And it'll walk you through creating a listing transaction name for the client, so on and so forth. So you'll name it, you'll pick what it's for, you'll answer whatever other questions you want, and you'll go ahead and save it. And then you look at the documents that are available in that template. And we will set up your template when you get your account set up. We'll set it up together.
Okay.
But consumer notice seller, consumer notice buyer. There are two consumer notices. I believe there's a difference to them. I've never read them word by word to figure out what the differences are. I don't think it's an earth-shattering mistake if you use the wrong consumer notice for the wrong party.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the one document, the only document that the state says you can't use. You can have a contract written on the back of a napkin. You can have a seller's disclosure that looks like anything. It's state legal. PAR might not like it,
right,
but state will like it. This document, you don't touch it. Now, the state does have one that's not PAR logoed, but I actually used to edit this for wholesale, and I added a wholesale blurb on top of it, and the attorney said, oh, no. He's like, you can also have a consumer notice that you're a wholesaler,
right,
but you can't separate the two. You can't change this.
okay,
This is the one, and what I tell everyone is it really describes, this is not a contract. People are, oh my God, what is that? It's not a contract. See, right up, big letters, not a contract. This just says, I'm a seller's agent, I'm a buyer's agent, I'm a dual agent. And you say to your seller, listen, I'm a seller's agent. I'm representing you as a seller. If a buyer comes to me and I wish to represent them, you have to approve them. I have to get your approval. Now, in the listing contract, there is a part that says dual agency is okay, but I usually at least text my sellers and say, dual agency, okay, we go with that? And so dual and designated, you'll only ever be dual, or you'll be a designated from someone else. For example, if you take on a dual, meaning you're a seller agent, your buyer wants to buy it, you're on both sides now. And there becomes some contention for some reason somewhere. They're fighting over inspections, they're fighting over something. And you're like, you know what, I can't honestly represent them both. Because when you're dual, you're confidential to both. Well, they say to you, well, how should I respond to this offer? You kind of can't.
Yeah.
There's a certain point at which it becomes incorrect, immoral, I don't know, whatever. And that's when you'll come to me and say, listen, I really think we need to move one of these to Ryan or to you or to. I am dual. Not me. Gorilla is dual because you're both my agents.
right.
Now, if we lateral to another agency, all right, then no one's dual.
Right.
But usually I'll designate you as seller and him as buyer or whatever, and whatever we decide. We'll sit down and say what makes sense. And that's where, if you're giving one of your sides to, let's say, Ryan, you're going to say, all right, Ryan, I'm going to give you this side, but I want 10% of what you're going to get from that side because I'm giving you something that you're going to make money off of.
Right.
Yes, he's doing work, but whatever. So that's what that is. Designated is, so dual is you're on both sides completely, there's nobody else.
Right.
Designated is you've been picked or whatever by me or whatever to say, you sit on that chair, Ryan sits on that chair, whatever. A good example might be our Ransom Township property, which is going to, once we finally get the access to it, we're having a lawyer deal with the eviction. that thing's going to go like wildfire. And I already have 5 buyers. And I know at some point it's going to become, there's going to be contention. It's
Right.
so someone's getting designated as something.
And then, so this says, seller agent, buyer agent, dual agent. We can also act as a transaction
Licensee. I don't mind transaction licensee. If someone says, I don't really want an agent, I just want to pay you to do the paperwork and get me on MLS. And that means you don't handle showings. You don't, maybe designated sometimes that you'll hand. I've only done like 5 designated in my entire life, or rather transactions my entire life. Transactional is they pay you a flat fee, they get it on the MLS, and probably they come back to you for the contracting. But the actual scheduling of showings, the actual dealing with questions, all that goes to the seller.
Okay.
You're saying, Mr. Seller, instead of paying me 3% to be your actual licensee, you're going to pay me 1%, and I'm just going to do the absolute minimum to keep you state legal.
That's it.
And that gets them to be able to list on the MLS.
Like they're basically buying MLS Act. This is what they're doing.
Okay.
And then there's also, I don't even know what they're called, but there's 2 others in the listing agreement I'll get to in a second, but I think they've actually been taken out. Those were what I call the helper agents, where they are basically referral agents. You're not the listing agent, but you're referring stuff to the listing agent. You're not the buyer's agent, but you're referring stuff to the buyer's agent. I don't consider those. I don't do those. I don't allow them. I'm not this is how unclear I am on what they are.
Yeah.
I've never met one. I've met now. That's not the same as a referral agent. Another agent refers you business. They just get a referral fee. They're totally separate. But there are these subordinate agents, and like I said, I always just put zeros next to them because I don't accept them.
Right.
If I'm the listing agent, I don't need your help. If I'm the buyer's agent, I don't need your help. If you refer me a client, great. That's separate.
but these other categories, and that's why they're not even on this anymore. Regardless of the business relationship, you got to do all this deal honestly in good faith and da-da-da. These contractual are negotiable. This is the important part. In Pennsylvania, everything's negotiable. And you probably ought to know all this, but I'm just kind of covering it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all negotiable. There's no percentage, there's no duration, there's no whatever, except what the parties agree to. Personally, okay, forget transaction, because that can be like 1%, that can be $500. If they just want, hey, listen, I'll pay you $500, put me on the MLS, and I never want to hear from you again.
Yeah.
We might take I'm going to take probably half that, but still, we might say, you know what, how much work is that really?
Right.
But percentage, duration, all that's negotiable. Personally, for me, if my side of the table, seller or buyer, is not getting 2.5, I'm not doing it. I mean, they're welcome to go find a 1%. If they want full service for 1%, they probably need enough they'll do it. That's now $1 million property, whatever. I mean, there may be a point at which, but normal. If they want it to be a less than a 6-month listing agreement, I'll back you up if you really want to.
Mm-hmm.
But wait a second, we go out there, I'm going to shoot pictures, I'm going to market the property, I'm going to answer questions, and then 60 days later, you're going to take the deal away?
Yeah.
I've done all this to generate you interest, and 61 days, I'm no longer in the loop? Not so much.
Yeah.
You should always include the property
Zoning information based on what the seller tells you. You should also always verify this, but initially you go for it.
on 90% of the time you're going with the seller tells you.
You tell them about the real estate recovery fund. That if the world screws up and the brokerage goes out of business, the state has money.
And then you fill them in and they sign them. And in your template, you're going to make sure that, that's not already filled in. Then you go to, whoopsie. Then you go to, I'll go to the next document. And I'm just walking you through generally what each document is for, basic listing.
Perfect.
Spanish consumer notice, shocking. There are consumer guides to a lot of things that are just booklets that tell them about them. So you can offer those as needed. Since it's next, we'll go to seller's estimated closing costs. The listing agreement last. This is just that.
And you got to explain to people, listen, this is an estimate. We're sitting here and you're telling me what your mortgage is. You're telling me what your tax implication is. I'm not sitting here verifying any of this.
I'm going with your listing price is this. I can
do the math and tell you what the commission's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking commissions, you have to go through some version of the whole scandal. You have to go through something, the whole scandal thing. Because listen, you don't have to pay the buyer's agent. I recommend you do. And my spiel is always the same. You don't have to pay him. But from a human standpoint, if I'm the buyer's agent and three book properties pay it for me and 3 properties don't, emotionally, which one is the buyer's agent leaning toward?
Yeah.
And as an advanced investor, if I decide the building's worth $100,000 and you're not paying, and I'm the buyer, and you're not paying the buyer's agency fee, well, I'm now offering you 96, 97. Because I know my stop number is 100.
Right.
So I don't want to pay the commission. So I don't want to pay the buyer. That's your choice, sir. That is your right. Doesn't change my life at all. But does it really hurt you to pay that and make it easier on the buyer's agent?
So then with the seller portion of that, you still have to negotiate and agree on your percentage. And is it not a reciprocal split then? Could it be 3 and 2.5?
It can be whatever you want.
Okay.
It can be so basically legally it can be whatever you want. Everything is negotiable. You know, one of my most frustrating parts when I started learning self-storage, I'm sitting there with a guy named Scott Myers, and if U-Haul was the 5th largest self-storage facility, Scott was the 45th largest owner of self-storage. So like, this guy knows what the hell he's doing. And we were sitting in this seminar, it was Tampa or whatever, and I asked a question. He's like, well, that depends. Every answer he had to everyone in the room was that depends. And I'm like, dude, he's like, it depends. He's like, the rule of thumb, and he was the first one to play. He's like, the rule of thumb is this. He's like, but you're sitting across the table from somebody on a specific deal, in a specific situation. It depends.
Yeah.
So normally what I do is it's like on this $1 million farm, which I let go very quickly. The guy wanted 60-day he wanted 60-day listing, he wanted this price. And Ryan really wanted to do it, so whatever, we did it. A week later or 3 weeks later, someone said, "Sir, find someone else." I said, "We're not going to get the number you want. No one's calling." And yeah, he wanted 90 days, 3% for buyer's agent, 1% for seller, or for 3% for seller's agent, 1% for buyer's agent. And okay, fine. For whatever reason, we went ahead with it. But normally, what I say to people is, I say, "Listen, normally I tell people, look, I'm suggesting 6 or 5, even split." And I'll get to in the contract how I write that, because I write it as an uneven split. I write it as 3.5, 2.5. Buyer's agent gets less. The reason I write it like that, and I've never done this, and I've never known, Bob Vanson, my first broker, taught me to write it like this. He said in his experience, he'd been burned by seller's agents. So he's like, if Sunita burns me for $5,000 on a meaning, doesn't give me half. Right. Doesn't give me an equal share. I write that down. And the next time I'm doing a listing selling to Sunita's firm, I'm going to take that 0.5%. And I'm going to keep taking until I make my $5,000 back. And I'm going to stop at that point. Now, I can't actually imagine myself doing that, but I always write my contract where the seller's agent gets a slightly higher number. Because if there is some reason, it's already there. And this is also back in the days when we disclosed our buyer agency commissions. It's a totally different world. So you figure out what your commission is, broker's fee total. So this is seller's top line, 95,000. I'll make it easier. Which means 6,000. Preparation of deed. And these are your guesses. I know Bilbo does them for $150. I know Toronto does them for $500. I don't know what you're getting it done for.
Yeah.
But you're paying something. Transfer tax. All right, I'm paying $100,000. It's in Scranton or Wilkes-Barre. 2%. Seller concession, home warranty, just line by line, municipal certifications. That's like a buyer notification inspection. So you're going down this, and we will do these on your cases. We'll do these line by line, but you're answering settlement fees, notary fees, surveys. And a lot of these I leave blank. This is what I love about this. We don't know your lender fees. And I put in $100. But I've said, I don't know what your lender is.
Yeah.
I don't know what their certifications are. I got no idea. Property repairs, tax certification. Don't know. Other title, liens, and mortgages are unknown. Title company to detail. And boom. And then it says, okay, We signed at 100. You're walking from the table to 91. And I go back and forth with them and I repeat this over and over. I'm like, the whole purpose of this document is to say, if you agree to 100,000, you're not putting 100,000 in your pocket.
Right.
I had a seller the day of closing. I'm literally driving to the title company. And we got the HUD because title companies are not required to give sellers the HUD the day before. So we're like finding this out now. And he went from making, I don't know, $6,000, now making $60. And he's like, I don't want to sell. I said, what do you mean? He's like, well, I owe more than I thought I did. And so the number's smaller. I said, guess what? That's nobody's problem.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I refuse to sign. I said, okay, well, let me, that's fine. I can't tell you you're an idiot because you are. But I said, my brokerage firm still gets paid. The other side still gets paid. All of the closing costs are now paid by you. All of the, not the transfer tax, we're not transferring, but their lender fee, their appraisal, their this, their that, their that, their that. And he's fighting me every way. And I'm like, look, there's nothing in the agreement that says seller can decide not to sell because they're getting less than they thought. There's no out. And I said, and you ever heard of specific performance? He's like, no, what's that? I said, they can sue you for whatever damages they want and or force you to sell. Will they win? Can they win? I have no idea. But you and them are going to be hiring lawyers and fighting this out until the end of time. Meanwhile, I'm going to be sending you a bill for both sides because it was a split transaction. I said, I'm getting paid. And any lawyer's fees that I incur, I'm also going to get paid. And so will the buyer's agency. I said, I don't want to calculate this.
Yeah.
I said, if I had to calculate, probably $25,000. So I understand emotionally, but on a practical business level.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you're not being very nice. You're not really supporting me. I said, actually, I'm supporting you by doing what I'm required to do, which is give you the benefit of my experience and training.
Yeah, honesty.
I can't support you by letting you make a stupid mistake.
Yeah.
That's whatever. So this whole document here, and it says estimated do not take into account, undisclosed, blah, 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 mortgage liens and whatever. But this whole thing is to say, and there's a reverse one, buyer's estimate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm buying it for 100. I'm probably ending up at 105, 106 because transfer tax, because inspections, not deep prep, but other. Oh, good. Getting a lot of my doubles. Dropping that price was helpful. So you go through this thing. That's just another document.
Now, do you ask to add it into the sheet here, mortgage payoff amount?
You ask everything. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing, and this is what I will admit that I always forget to do, is when we leave the signing, I tell my sellers, or I should, I do forget this. This is easily forgotten. Because Betty Bilbo had me spoiled, the title company right upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
She asks the bank for the mortgage payoffs.
Yeah.
Every other title company that I've met doesn't do that.
See, we wouldn't accept a payoff from an agent, homeowner. We had to get it right from the bank because the same reason, like you said, with the proof of funds thing, we wanted to know we're getting it from the right bank, it's going to the right place. So that's surprising to hear.
Well, for the purpose of this, I'll take it from the owner for the purpose of an estimate.
Right.
Then I'll say, you know what, Mr. Owner, assume we close in 2 months. Call your bank and get me a written payoff based on 2 months from now.
Yep, we do that.
And that's the part that that does get forgotten sometimes by me or by them, because then you're listing and you forget and da-da-da. But you want to put it on them because not a lot of title companies will deal with banks directly anymore for whatever. I don't find that out. So for the purpose of this, yes. For the purpose of publishing on the MLS, yeah, until they get to an actual payoff. And that's why everything is, and that's why everything is estimate. What does it say on the MLS? Information is deemed accurate but not guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the only person that's hurt by a wrong payoff number here is the seller, because all the buyer knows is I'm buying for $100,000 if I get clear title.
Yeah.
If you owe $99,000, if you owe $120,000, I don't care because I'm getting clear title. So the only time I accept it is here. The title company won't accept it. The actual, and in wholesaling, obviously, you're basically a dual agent.
Yeah.
So knowing accuracy is more important. In wholesale, I always ask for proof. in retail, I do always ask for proof, but sometimes because they're on the market longer, it gets forgotten. And then once we get under contract, I say, well, where's your payoff? I do that. Like I said, Betty had me spoiled. Then, of course, lead. This is any building built before 1978, residential. Personally, me, it's any building. It could be built last month. It could be a warehouse. It could be a commercial. You're doing one of these. Why? Because I don't want to have an argument over it. Yeah. If they go in the future to turn it into a residential, I know I'm covered. Legally, there is no reason to do it. But I'm still doing it. And the important thing is, I have been built in 1920. Is there lead in it? Oh, yeah, there's lead in it. Because back before 1978, there was no non-lead paint. But I don't have a knowledge that there is currently lead in the building.
Right.
Because I don't have a test. So, no knowledge, no records. I've never met almost never met a lead disclosure that didn't say no knowledge, no records. They sign it. You also down here, this is the part I don't understand. You're initialing and you're signing. Now, just to put it in perspective, the EPA says this section has a $33,000 penalty. This section has a $33,000 penalty. The agent section has a $33,000 per agent penalty. So the EPA is not joking around with this. Have I ever heard? And the other one that when I got to EXP, I had 4 or 5 that I did, where because of the way I put it in DocuSign, the initials ended up kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. And I crossed it out and put it where it belonged. EPA is like, you can't do that. Send it back to your client, get a fresh one. That's right. And I had another client did X's here, and EXP was like, nope, initials. The other one that caught me in EXP, and virtually let this go all the time, is it would signature, and this was for the DocuSign. I put in, Gary Krupa LLC, and he wouldn't sign it. He would just hit the sign button, which DocuSign puts in Gary Krupa LLC.
Right.
And but Berkshire never cared. I don't know if they ever looked. EXP was like, no, Gary Krupa doesn't have hands, doesn't have a brain. It's a company. It can't sign.
Right.
We need a human's signature here. So anyway, there's that. And this and the other disclosure have to technically happen within 7 days of signing, but really before anyone puts in an offer. No offer is legitimate without this. Then seller's property disclosure. So I always do consumer notice, estimate of costs, listing agreement together.
Right. I
might do the lead. I never give them this one up front because it's a lot.
Yeah.
So I give them this one. They sign all that because if you give them this, they'll take forever. They'll think about it. And they will have. You'll want to have a commitment to list.
Right.
So push these off till later. Okay. Like the next step, get it signed, then boom, it immediately sends the next one out. Estates can exempt themselves. The executor of an estate can exempt. And these are, by the way, should also be done for all wholesale deals. The Pennsylvania law is and I had this debate with, I can't think of the attorney's name up in Bernie Ave. He's like, those are only for realtors. I said, well, that's funny. Required that before agreeing to sale, the seller of a residential transaction must disclose. It doesn't say the represented seller. It doesn't say the licensed seller. Right. It says the seller must disclose. So you do them. Now, even in my estate cases, I always have them do it anyway. So let's sign here to exempt yourself. And then let's all be fair to the buyer and give them whatever we actually know or what we think to be true. You've exempted, write it. Don't use this document, write it on a piece of paper, but just let's be fair. The buyer wants to know what you know.
Right. And I'd imagine that's because a lot of times they don't have attachment or live in the property to know the defects.
Yeah. Exactly. And the whole logic is, you don't know who, and the executor might not even be family.
Right.
I was involved in an estate where, the executor was an attorney they hadn't even figured out who the actual family and heirs were yet.
Mhm.
The executive it was a big multi-billion dollar whatever. And the executive was an attorney. I mean, what did they know? They couldn't even find the property on a map. They were in California, whatever. So, but then they go through and remember, it's best of your knowledge.
Mhm.
Yes, no, unknown. Yes, no, unknown. And I tell them, I said, this is also where you get to brag about the good stuff you know about the property. And if there's other stuff they know, you just tell them to attach more pages. The point is, what I tell them all is, if you lie here, this is bad. But I've seen cases, I've talked to agents who were in cases where there's a belief that there was a lie on here.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, my attorney says we can't prosecute. And I'm like, well, yeah, it makes sense. Well, what do you mean? The attorney would have to prove the person lied.
Right.
So if they said no, oh, well, that's what I thought. Did the best I could. You now have to say, well, you knew. And there's how you knew. So I've never, probably has happened, but I've never heard of a case where you're liable for doing one.
Mhm.
I've heard of cases where you're liable for not doing one. Now, in my wholesale agreements, it has, we're going to do one, but if we don't do one, everyone accepts that it's been waived. Some attorney gave me verbiage like that. So if it's real or not, it came from an attorney. There is no waiving. We're doing these.
Right.
And I, for the most part, do that. Now, on off markets, I have a much simpler one. The state has, if you've ever been to the state law for this, it's just 10 questions. And so my off market one is question blank, question blank, question blank. That way they can word it however they want.
Right.
Again, there's no requirement to use the PAR one, but since we are PAR members, let's use what covers us.
Yep.
Also, the other reason I am in favor of using as many PAR documents as possible is because no one will ever question the document. I've sent my wholesale agreement off. Actually, what became my Newton Rantham listing, it was going to be an off-market purchase, and their attorney's kind of a turn, and they don't even like their attorney. And I sent him my off-market one-page bullet point, basically a memo of understanding,
Mhm.
and he flipped out. He's like, "This looks like this." Da, da, da. I sent him a PAR contract, everything else the same, and/or signs the whole song. Oh, we're fine with this.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so we went from 1 page to 14 pages, most of which doesn't apply, but you're happy. And I think it comes down to convenience.
Yeah.
He looks at it, he doesn't have to question what's in it, he knows exactly where he needs to look.
Yeah.
So for here at the firm, we use contracts is like now. Change a listing agreement. Anytime you have a price change, anytime you have anything change, you do one. DocuSign is fine. So it doesn't matter where they live, it matters what the property is. Obviously, we're only licensed in PA.
Mhm.
If you have a New York seller on a PA property, you can do DocuSign and digital. If you have a New York property and a PA and a seller, New York does not allow digital signature. New York is all wet ink. Their seller who's selling property here, that's okay, digital.
Right.
But property, I was doing a wholesale up there, and I actually did all digital and sent it off to his attorney. He's like, okay, this is all great, we're fine with it. But he's like, I have to have him come in here and wet sign this all. Yeah, okay, fine. Listing contract. Now, there's a few different listing contracts, and this is where you do want to make sure you're using kind of the right one for the purpose. Not kind of, ideally the right one for the purpose. And I'm just out now. Okay, fine. All right, so we'll go back in here. So there's a few different listing contracts. There's exclusive right to sell and exclusive agency. So exclusive agency, remember the difference?
Briefly.
Okay, basically, and I always double check this to make sure. I always use exclusive right to sell, which means it doesn't matter who brings the buyer.
Mhm.
I get paid.
Right.
That's the one we use. I don't ever use the other one.
Right.
Well, I should say, I can't imagine ever using that one. Maybe
Which what still gives them the right to.
if they bring a buyer, you don't get paid.
Right.
So it's like, well, I'm going to do all this work, I'm getting paid. If you're hiring me, I'm getting paid. Deal with it.
Absolutely.
And I actually write it on my listing agreements. It doesn't matter who brings the buyer, I'm getting paid. But I'll show you that in a second. Then there's also commercial listing, vacant land listing. There's different versions. The commercial listing is, and I've done the wrong paperwork and then I fixed it later. There's a short sale addendum to a listing contract we'll get to in a second. So, and you'll see, I only have exclusive right to sell. I don't even have the exclusive agency. I forget why there's two. Did I just put it in twice? Oh, this is the commercial one. I wish they would have named them like commercial, whatever.
Right.
And in zip forms, by the way, when you're searching for a document, they were not consistent when they put stuff in. Some of them spells out commercial, some of them COM, some of them COMM, some of them COMML. Estimate, EST. So like when I'll show you how to search for a document, and it's just you're gonna play with it a while. Like the one thing I know about the estimate of closing costs is ESTI will show you it. Like you have to kind of play around. They're in there.
Right.
And there's unfortunately, and I haven't looked recently, but there's no like comprehensive directory. And let me just go look at everything.
Right.
Because when I got to EXP, they're very, very type A. And they were like, well, where's this form? And I'm like, I've never heard of that form. Well, you should have used this form for that form. I said, well, is there like a database that I'm doing this is what I need?
Right.
And they're like, no, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Like, it would make a lot of sense. Thanks. Like, how do we find, she's like, but that's what we're here for. That's why EXP has a compliance department. So listing agreement, no real surprises, brokerage firm. And this is, I got to fix the template because this is all the old stuff, but boom, boom. So you will, and this is why you use templates. You will set up your template with all of your stuff will automatically fill. So as long as you use your template, it'll have the broker in there, it'll have your license in there, it'll have all the fields already in there. What I do a lot of times is I will simply be lazy and I will go to my list of transactions and I'll grab the last transaction and clone it. I won't go back to templates.
Right.
So
Yeah. I have a tendency to do things like that.
Yeah. So wherever you're getting it from, and always reread it because you might, like I might change something here in this demo, and then I'll go back and pull that transaction and I'll screw it up what I actually meant to do. So this is the seller. If you have another listing contract on this property, well, that's bad. Don't do that. Property information, PIN number, present use, zoning, and your seller is signing off on all of this. So at some point you should be walking through this with your seller. If your seller's experienced, you don't have to like line by line, but you try to walk through the important stuff. Start date, end date, not more than 365 days apart. When you cross the 1 year line, they have to sign a renewal, broker fee, or whichever is greater. And you can also add a extra fee. What's her name? Robin. She's one of my new agents. Like Rebecca was sticking me up. She came to me. She's like, I charge all my buyers a $500 extra fee. And she told me because she does a lot of virtuals. She'll walk through something, she'll do a video for them. She'll do an estimate of repair costs. She'll do this. She'll do that, which are all gray area, whether it's really under your license. So I'm now having her have a liability release signed. But I said, no, you charge them $500, I get $150, you get the rest. I said, oh. So we can talk about, I rarely do this, but it can be done. Let me just check everything. This is a little pouch. Come on. All right, we're good. Yeah, let me just make sure they're not asking for any money from Home Depot. Good. Contractor Home Depot payments coming through here. So seller will pay balance of broker's fee if we exchange it during the term. If a ready, willing, and able buyer is found willing to pay the listed price. I had a seller agree to whatever the number was. That was his listing agreement. And during the time of listing, I got him that up. And he said, no, I want more. I said, okay, just understand that line, I get my commission. Because I brought you what you asked for. I did my job. Well, but I didn't sell the house. Okay, but I brought it to you at the asking price. Right. I said, if you want to, I said, next time you want to sign a contract for $190,000, you know, you want me to do a change in listing agreement to 160. But I said the problem is once you sign the CLA, you've now told me a new asking price. I bring you what you asked for, I get paid.
Right.
Now, do I actually go after the whole commission? Would we negotiate? Probably. He just kind of fell back in line and sold. Negotiations are pending the ending date result in a sale, meaning the day before the end of the ending date, we sign a contract and it takes a year to close. We're going back and forth, back and forth.
Mhm.
The bar on closing on Friday on the buyer's agent, we closed it. We signed it October 10th. We agreed to it October 10th. It took the lawyers till February to write the contract. We've emotionally been under contract for a year.
Yeah.
If this, you know, we're getting paid. Touch it. Seller signs and refuses to sell the property, unable to sell because of failing to do something they're required to do. I had a deal where they, you know, here's a list of repairs, no problem, seller will take care of. Day of closing, seller had not taken care of. Buyer is not looking to extend, not looking to adjust, not looking to just discount, tough boobies. Seller didn't deliver. I told the seller, I said, find a way to deliver, or all those bad things I told you about my commission, Right. In that case, there wouldn't have been a lot of punitive or the one where the court forces you. I can't think of the name of it. The one, the forcing performance.
Liquidated.
No, it's specific performance. It's where the court says, Mr. Seller, I don't care that you don't want to sell. Just the court orders this property to be sold per this contract. And I have heard, I was always told specific performances don't work in Pennsylvania because prove that's the only 2-family in Scranton that you could possibly buy, Mr. Buyer. Attorney John Rogers tells me, he's like, I want specific performance all the time because I had an agreement on that property. And he's like, so specific performance, I don't know if it wins. John Rogers is a very, very well-known attorney. He's one of the largest attorneys in the market. He tells me he wins them all the time. But I always held back from him because, well, there's 1,000 doubles. How do I prove that's the only double I can buy? But anyway, so basically what this is saying is the seller has agreed to sell and then changes their mind. They're paying. Whether they're paying me or they're paying, whether or not they're paying penalties, I have the right to collect.
Right.
The property or any part of it is taken by the government, eminent domain, whatever. I still have the right to collect. I'm not really sure how, I'm not sure why the government takes it away, but it says it there. Okay. A sale occurs after the ending date of this contract if within 270 days and the buyer was shown the property during the listing agreement. The idea of what this was supposed to create was this was supposed to create buyer and seller exchange business cards and say, call me when the listing's up. And then they, whatever, under contract, however they do it, I discover, I'm not sure how I discover, but I discover the property's been sold. I discover that's the buyer. I can connect the dots, and my attorney goes and says, wait a second. Within 270 days, now the seller could know that's there and wait 271 days, and I got nothing. But it's for something where we brought the parties together, or the much more average version is the buyer doesn't make an offer, and then 30 days later calls their agent back and says, I want that property. Well, the agent and I both deserve our money because the procuring cause was I had it listed, they saw it during the listing agreement. The other one's sort of a dark horse story, I guess. And the property is not listed by an exclusive right to sell with another broker. This is the get out of jail free card. You call an expired listing. You sign a new exclusive right to sell contract. And by the way, it tells you exclusive right to sell. That's the one that protects you no matter who the buyer is. So you call an expired listing. We list it. The next day, a buyer that saw it previously calls back and says, I want it. That other broker doesn't get paid because it's now listed exclusively with us.
Right.
If it was an exclusive agency contract that we had, there might be a window there. There would at least be an argument. If sale occurs, balance broker fee paid on delivery of whatever. This is the other one which I never believed in. I thought this was wrong. That if settlement does not occur, but for whatever reason the buyer gets the commission, or I'm sorry. Settlement does not occur, but for whatever reason, the seller gets some portion or all of the deposit. I had, next to Myers High School, there's that little short garage that used to be lag towing.
Mhm.
I had that listed, we had it under contract, and it dragged on and on and on, turned out, and basically did not close. For no fault of the seller, buyer simply just walked away. The story was that they didn't get the deal on Myers, so they didn't want the short building.
Mm.
Well, I had zero on here. My seller got the $20,000 deposit. And I had never, like I said, I felt this was a wrong section. Well, he got 20 grand, I got nothing for 100 hours in.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? 50-50 doesn't sound fair. It's his building, it's his risk. 20, I mean, for me, 25. I don't care. You know, just the point is there's a compensation. Right. Pick whatever. Can I help you?
Yeah, I talked to what's her name, to see if she could fill this up for me. She says to come over and somebody will fill it up for me.
No.
What's her name? Brain,
Betty
maybe. What's her name?
from Bilbo Abstract?
Yeah, let me see. Let me see, because I'm not with the names. 237? Or?
Oh, Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly, yeah, okay.
Okay. Hang on 1 second. Let me put this on pause
Oh, okay.
because Kelly's actually my wife and manager. All right. I don't know if I can pause. So I'm just going to do stop camera, stop. Go, all right. Sorry about that. So yeah, that's, my wife runs Crimson Cape Property Management. Broker just has to have a separate office. She never comes here, but this is legally it. All right, so basically back to this. So that was what that's for. This is the section which recently changed. This is the whole NAR scandal crap. And it doesn't even mention those other two types of assistant agents. But this is where seller authorizes and instructs the broker to offer. And the reason I'm specifying this is because Dan Taylor, who's the president of Scranton Board, he's also the one who runs Keller Williams for the entire, I think maybe the entire state. This authorizes the seller to offer to the buyer agent. The buyer agent doesn't keep it. It technically belongs to the seller's agent because they've agreed up here to 6% or whatever. And down here, the buyer's agent doesn't take it. They've agreed to pay us 6%. I don't know if morally I would ever do that, but that's what it says. So commission of $6, $4, 0 if not specified, paid from the broker's fee, yada yada. The rules of the MLS do not permit broker to advertise, otherwise inform. Seller authorizes broker to advertise or otherwise inform potential buyers about any compensation authorized by this contract unless stated here. So this is how much you're offering to the buyer agent, Mr. Seller. And this is if you don't want us to tell the buyer's agent how much they're going to get paid. You have to tell me that here. Because even though you can't put it on the MLS, we can put it on our website. I'm actually considering starting a little database where agents can all put up their broker compensations. The point is, if for some reason the seller, and I can't imagine the seller even understanding any of this.
Right.
I pretty much focused them here. What have we agreed? And I've already filled it in. Seller concessions. Seller is going to make financial concessions at time of settlement. Okay. The one I just closed, they knew the garage door was messed up. They knew something was messed up with the septic pump. So they just said, we're just giving the $5,000 concession toward that. So even the listing agreement, the listing even said, asking price is asking price. You will get $5,000 concession built in. Whatever. So this is where that kind of stuff goes. Advertise that the seller's willingness to negotiate to maximum amount to X, Y. I'm not sure why you would publish a price and then say we're willing to negotiate up to this amount.
Yeah.
Offer your price, let calls come in, see where it goes.
And then how do you decide when they do make the concession whether or not your commission is gross or net of?
Well, it's almost always based on net.
Okay.
And actually, you know what? You just made a good point. I don't think it used to be in here. It used to be in here, and I don't see it anymore. So almost always is it based on that. We never decide anything. If it's unclear, I would go back and say to the seller, hey, listen. But the rule of thumb is transfer taxes and other things are paid on gross. We're paid on net. And the logic being, if the seller's not getting the dollars, why should we? Right. So I think it's not asked anymore. They might have simply changed the rule and just made it based on net. I'd also be cautious in that if there was a reason to make it gross, I would probably have the seller sign off on that because we don't want to get in a pissing match later.
Yeah.
Whatever. It just becomes, the lawyers will cost more than the benefit. Seller is willing to negotiate in which buyers, if the buyer asks for a seller concession, the seller will consider it unless they sell specifically no. And again, I can't imagine a seller, unless they're a really experienced seller, they're not going to understand this. So your renter's going to say, just these are blank. We're acting as seller agent, decides going to notice, we'll cooperate with the broker and the seller will cooperate with the broker. All showings will be communicated by broker or seller. That's what showing time comes into. We'll get to that in a second. If it's rented, seller will give leases to broker, yada, yada, which they almost never do. It's a royal pain in the butt, pulling the teeth. Seller will not enter, review, or modify leases during the term without broker's written consent. If I've advertised that you have a 1-year lease at $1,000 a month, or month-to-month lease, don't change that without. Can I consent? Can I disagree with you? Probably not, but at least make sure that I'm publishing what's true. Now, what I do on multifamily or any kind of rental property is I have something called an estoppel certificate. Estoppel certificate is a 1 or 2 page document that I don't care if you have a lease, I don't care what you have. This is signed by the tenant and the seller before closing, preferably earlier on. That says, here's my rent, here's my security deposit, I'm due on this month, I'm due on this day, I'm responsible for snow, all the basic bullet points. Because I had one, and this is where I didn't invent it because I discovered it existed, but we were going to closing and the seller claimed no security deposits. And somehow I got this mentioned in front of a tenant, and the tenant's like, I have a security deposit. And the tenant pulls out the lease. Well, no. And I go back to the seller and say, well, but Mr. Tenant, remember, we took that away because of this and this and this. It was spent on this. And the tenant said, I have no memory of that. Now, I know the seller well enough to know the tenant was lying.
Yeah.
But I look at the seller and said, the problem is the lease you signed says this. Unless you get them to agree to something else, what's the judge going to say?
Yeah.
And I don't know. He made it happen. The tenant agreed. I'm not sure what he did. I'm hoping it wasn't anything too dark, but I got my piece of paper that was delivering what I needed to be delivered. The nicer version, if I always go for the negative, the nicer version is you buy a building and you're told there's no security deposit. Tenant moves out and says, well, yeah, there is. And here's my lease saying I got it.
Yeah.
Guess what the judge is going to enforce? Not what you were told, but what the lease says. And then of course you're not responsible to this, but you always say, have you kept the security deposit in escrow? Have you paid interest on it as you're required? Have you followed it enough? It's not our obligation, but that's me. I'm supposed to pay interest on it. Yeah, better clean up your mess before we go, before we sell.
Right.
Broker service to buyer, broker not responsible for damages, deposit money will be held in escrow, other properties. Yes, what a shocker. We're dealing with other people. It's amazing. Will reveal defects if property is built 478 lead law. Home warranties, recording, seller understands the potential buyers may engage in photography, video, whatever. Any person, keep stuff private that should be private. Recovery fund. Transfer of this contract. The broker owns the contract. If you move to a different firm, I have the right to transfer it, or not, because I do, whatever. But no other contract. This guy asked me this yesterday on a wholesale deal. He's like, so can I still keep showing the house? I said, no, unless you want to pay me $5,000. What do you mean? I said, I have a $5,000 penalty if you make a deal that doesn't involve me. He's like, but I said, if I'm doing everything I said, you guys do everything you said. Real simple. Conflict of interest, entire contract, marketing the property, broker will use an MLS, broker will not use an MLS. I actually had $1 million estate property that was $9 million. And the guy's like, so I don't want you listing it. I don't want you telling other local brokers about it. I don't want you advertising it. And I said, so how do I sell your house? He's like, well, most of the other brokers in town are my clients. He's like, I don't want to go to them because they're my clients, but I don't want them knowing I went to somebody else. And I said, okay, how do I sell your house? This is like 2012. I said, you're a $9 million estate, gorgeous estate, phenomenal at the top. But I said, if I can't tell people about it, what do you want to pay me? What can I do?
Right.
And you want drone flights and 360s and this and that. I said, you probably deserve that. So I don't know why you would ever not have it. I mean, let me back up. Now that the MLS has all this stupidity of not, I understand why somebody might say, I don't understand why they would say, but you don't need the MLS, like the one you're talking about down there.
Right.
You put it on Zillow, you put it on, okay, fine, you probably don't need it. But why they would exclude it, I don't know. Virtual office, internet data exchange, comments, do they want comments on their listings allowed? Or do they not want comments on their listings allowed? Stuff like that. Advertising and marketing. Use for sale lockbox unless stated here. Photos, videos, unless stated here. This is where the seller can say, no, I don't want a lockbox. No, I don't want a sign. Very, very common on rentals. It's one of the reasons I don't put out a lot of those, because most of my clients are landlords. They don't want their tenants either knowing they're selling, which
Right.
they will know they're selling, but they don't want it obvious every day they come home.
Right.
They don't want your sign being destroyed, yada, yada. Publication of sale price, copyright, fixtures and personal property. I almost leave these always in. Kitchen appliance and, included kitchen appliance and seller personal property specified when sales contract is signed. You ask the seller, what are you leaving behind and what are you not leaving behind? And this is where you have the conversation with the seller and you say, let's talk about fancy fixtures. When Myers High School was sold, because it's commercial for that example, but the entire ceiling in the auditorium is stained glass. I heard it's Mr. Tiffany stained glass, as in built by Mr. Tiffany. Well, it's attached. So it's a fixture.
Right.
If you don't want the stained glass fixture to go with the house, specify it now. And make sure it's specified when you read the offer of agreement that we're not selling it. If your grandmother's, whatever is attached to the house, it's going with the sale unless you specify otherwise.
Right.
Flip that on its head. Kitchen appliances. Really, they're not attached. I mean, I guess screwed in or whatever, but not really attached.
Right.
Gas line, is that really attached? But those normally go. So this way you say, are we selling with the stove, with the fridge? Let's specify that to be clear. You got a $5,000 Wolf stove. When they walk through, there's a Wolf stove. When they walk to buy the house, there's a Kenmore. We're going to have an argument. So we be clear rather now than then. Tenant, personal, whatever. Tax inspection assessment. You're going to pay half the transfer tax. Here's your estimates of all the stuff, HOAs and whatever. You also get the HOA numbers because you've got to talk to the HOA about what their transfer requirements are. Every damn HOA, I'm sure you've done this, has some sort of going away fee. Foreign investment, crap, title and possession. Are you selling the minerals? Are you selling da-da-da? Here's where they guess their mortgages. This is where you're okay with a guess. I think I know that. No, usually, can you have that number close, for me soon? But you're okay with guesses. What do you know? And most of them say there's nothing. And most title companies find something. You've been through enough of these. I don't know anything. Oh yeah, that credit card, they lied to me. Well, don't care what the story is. It's on. Don't care. Really don't care. Buyer financing. I don't know why that section exists. If the money's green, why do we care?
Yeah.
Now, if it's a dump and it's not going to pass FHA, because remember, FHA, VA, USDA are pretty much annual exams. So if you've got a dumpy house, it probably ain't passing those.
Right.
But I don't know why a seller would reject it.
Yeah.
They may not sign it, but why would they reject it? But that's an option. Special instructions, special clauses, property description, signal agency, consumer services. What other documents are being attached? Estoppels, leases, whatever. And again, you're an independent contractor. I need to be okay with what concessions you're offering. But if you're like, hey, listen, I'll take a 1%. If you say I'll do 2%, 1% to the brokerage firm, 1%, whatever. I'm fine. As long as we're on board with it, I don't care what you do. What I personally always did is if listing agent is dual on the transaction, same agent brought buyer and seller, then I drop the commission 1%. If the broker is dual, but if the broker is a dual agent and the two agents are different through designation or whatever, we still reduce it a little bit. My logic on that, and this is when I'm dealing with volume with key clients. So what I would do is, you come in the door, you're 6%, back in the 3 and 3 days in that world. If you're doing repeat business with me, or I think there's a good chance of repeat business, and I also, if I talk to a wholesale client, and they end up listing, I give everybody 5. I go from 6 to 5, like it's just going out of style. If I bring both sides, you're at 4. If you bring one side and Ryan brings the other side, it's 4.5, 4 3/4. The broker will give a little bit of a discount because I'm on both sides of the equation. I don't need to make double.
Right.
My logic with going from 5 to 4 or 6 to 5, whatever that drop would be, is it took me extra work to find that buyer. I did some extra work, but did I really do double the work?
Right.
And if this is a one-time offer, a one-time client, I'm selling their primary home or whatever, I'm probably not giving a discount.
Right.
I'm not even putting that in. But if for some reason I think this is a repeat client, or it is a repeat client, or whatever, I'll give them the bonus. Now, I had a closing, right, plus or minus COVID, I forget. I think it was right after. And it was a $2 million sale, and I was 300, 400 hours into this thing. And we finally get to an offer that everyone is okay with. And the seller, and I had this 5-4 set up. The seller was doing fully exclusive work with. He and I stopped working together for like 2 years because I was so pissed. He called me up. He's like, all right, now we negotiated the numbers. Everyone knew the numbers. And he said, there was 3 partners. It was a confusing story, but the 3 partners. Like, well, my partner will only sign if you go down to 3% instead of 4%. And I had a real tough choice because I was like, bleak you. I was like, forget it, ain't happening. But then I sat back and said, okay, 3% is 60,000. Or whatever it was between 40, it was between 40 and 60,000, whatever the percentages were. All right, so my choice isn't 40 versus 60. My choice is 40 versus 0, because there is no 60 on the table.
Right.
So, all right, I'll take 40. Obviously it's 40 as opposed to 0. I'll take that.
Right.
Could I have stood by and said, yes, except the problem was the agreed price was way below the listing price. So that other clause saying I get paid if I bring all parties to the table, I didn't have, because they weren't offering listing. They were offering way below listing. So, I mean, gun to our heads, will we make a different decision? I don't know. It kind of, this is where it all depends. But, normally a seller is not going to negotiate at the last minute.
Yeah.
But you just have to, you get to know personalities. You get to know, and I don't mean this in the discriminatory way at all, but you get to understand cultures. In their culture, this is the way you do it.
Yeah.
When you have the pressure point over somebody, you give it one last shot. And that is simply where they come. That's simply what they're trained in. That's how they grew up.
Right.
But generally, I give them that.
And from what you just said, does a ready, willing, and able buyer, if that's not at asking price, does that not catch that?
Right. So exactly. So basically, it says up top that if I bring a ready, willing, and able buyer offering asking price, is the only time I get paid if they refuse it.
Okay.
Because and of course that makes sense. If I say I want to sell for $250, and you bring me a ready, willing, able buyer at $200, have I brought what you asked me to bring? No, you asked me for a buyer at $250.
Yeah, because unethically, you could get someone to say, get an offer in, and then, I got you an offer, so give me my money.
Oh yeah, you absolutely could, and of course then they'd have to prove that you backdoored with that buyer, and I don't know the process by which, and of course the buyer would have to deposit in, and they would have to go through their whatever rigmarole, provide their proof of funds or whatever. I don't know the process by which you'd even enforce that upper contract.
Mm-hmm.
You can enforce it by filing winning and filing a lien against the property, but I don't know how you ever get paid.
Yeah.
If they just say like this seller was in a situation where he's like, I want to sell, I don't have to sell. He's like, I'm cash flowing $20,000 a month off these properties, net of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to move. I'm a multimillionaire anyway. I don't care. I had a similar situation with him. He had a pair of doubles side by side that he built from ground up in 2012. It's like 2020, so they're new basically. And he's like, I want $549,000. I told him when we signed the agreement, like, Ryan, you're crazy.
Yeah.
But he stuck to it, and I bought him $548,900. And he's like, no. I'm like, it wasn't quite that close because I would have given him the damn $100.
Right.
But whatever. He's like, no. We hung out, and he got his number. He eventually got his number, but I was so frustrated because I'm like, wait a second. It was like, you wanted $549, I brought you $534. It was like, if I'd given him the difference, I would have had no commission. So I was like, no, not going to happen. But, and he was just standing pat.
Yeah.
And those are frustrating. And of course, that's when you go into it. I had one early on where, this is way before COVID, like 2015. And this guy on Pittston Ave in Scranton had a pretty average to dumpy building. And he wanted a stupid number for it. And he's like, I'm only going to sign a listing agreement with this number. And I told him to walk. I sit down. I talked to my broker. And Bob's like, what? Like, yeah, like I can't, in all honesty. He's like, yeah. He's like, I get that. You can't, in all honesty, sign a contract, whatever. He's like, but what you also and this is now literally the phrase I use with the client. He's like, you walked away from having your sign in front of that building for the next year. He's like, you could have locked him into a year contract and had a Berkshire Hathaway Steve Franco sign in front of the building on Pittston Ave, very high traffic area. He's like, so I understand where you're coming from. He's like, but think about the other side. So now I literally say to clients, I'll list it for you at a stupid price. But I said, we're doing a 1-year contract or whatever. And I said, I'm gonna be straight with you. It's not selling.
Yeah.
And I mean, now I was wrong of this 549, a pair of twos. There was 2 buildings, 2 bedrooms in each unit. So it was four 2-bedrooms for almost $600,000. I don't know what these people were thinking who were buying it. None of the math worked.
Yeah.
But I took that one for the exact same reason. I now have a sign that it's the hill section, so I'm not getting a lot of traffic, but whatever. But okay, I'm getting the advertising.
Right.
So, and then you check off consumer notice, property disclosure, lead-based. And they will always sign these even if you haven't given them, because you'll say, listen, the property disclosure lead-based I've not given you, but as soon as you sign this, I'll give it to you. And they don't care. At that point, they'll fall. But you know what, if they're not, I'll just email it to you, please fill it out. Yeah, that's the other thing. Sometimes I'll send them DocuSign and I'll email them the other. That way they've received everything. No one's lying.
Right.
So your group, whatever. So then that's that one. And I know we've been here a while, so let me just don't care. Get back to that. So then the only other seller documents, and the rest of them are special situation, short sale agreement, vacant land, addendum to sale, commercial addendum. The commercial is not a seller's disclosure. It has a slightly different term, but the rest of them are specific to a deal.
Mm-hmm.
These are your basic documents for listing. Now, if you, I mean, I don't know if you want me to print these. I don't know if you want to get sign up to the board and get your own setup.
Yeah.
And then so what you're going to do from here? Let me just stop this because I think the rest of it. Now, is there any questions you have?
So when you get everything signed and say you send it to the title company, what are you liable to send the title company? Because I just know from the title company end what we were looking for.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, we always had to ask for IDs and things like that. Do you ever prep the sellers and say, hey, this is what the title company will need, or?
Oh yeah, okay, good. Okay, good question. So taking a step back, identification.
Mhm.
The person you're doing all of this with has to be the one in control of the deal. And I'll tell you a few mistakes I made early on. The first mistake I made with this Indian client, he had 3 different companies. One was him and his wife. And it was always the wife. The boys actually weren't on the LLCs.
Mhm.
And then there was one was him, or one was his wife, and one of his friends' wives, one of his friend's wives another way. And I didn't understand the nuances. He signed it all. He was the only operational member. The others, one was a doctor, one was actually a big real estate broker.
Mhm.
And so Roger did it all. And I didn't ask the others to sign. I only took his signature.
Right.
Very lucky the others were on board because we got to closing and the title company made everybody sign.
Resolution probably.
Well, yeah, we had to do that. So basically, so what I do now with my LLC signers is I want to see a copy of your operating agreement, which he didn't have one. I had to help him write one. Actually 3 different companies. I have all parties sign. And that gets very difficult because in his situation with different owners on different LLCs, partly rightly, partly wrongly, he would get mad if I had sent his personal one to the people who are not involved. So you got to be careful who gets what. I make them all sign. And I, as an abundance of caution, even though it's the wife on the paper, I made the husband and wife both sign. And they can instruct you not to, but since I always talk to Doctor, but his wife was the signatory, I wanted both of the signatures on the paperwork. I always talked to Roger, but his wife was a signatory. I wanted both of them on the paperwork. Then there was, before closing, a resolution. I didn't know what an operating agreement was. So now I make operating agreements happen. You give me this, great, we can do all this. I push my start date for this listing out 3 or 4 days, maybe 2 days, to make us get time to get operating agreements, to make us get time to get da 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 da. And I sometimes even hide in that last section. I say, listing agreement officially starts 2 days after final signature. If I've got because he's a doctor, he's gonna take 3 or 4 days to sign something, he just doesn't get around to it. Fine. And I do ask for copies of ID or for some identification if I feel the situation is warranted. I have had a lot of pushback on IDs being personal information, but I figure, okay, if the person I'm dealing with gave me doctor and wife's phone number and email addresses, doctor and wife both signed everything and they both confirmed it, and I have the operating agreement, does an ID really, how much danger am I really in? How much fraud could I have? Would some random other doctor with the exact same name happen to have the exact same email address? Like, how far would that have to go down the if clause? Okay, if that's true, and that's also true, and that's also true, how many of those do I have? So you always get that. You always get proof of your operating agreement. You always get and then you do go through and you ask them for all the stuff. Say, listen, you got to prepare this for me. I know they're going to ask me, especially investment properties, they're going to ask me for trailing 12. They're going to ask me for, they're going to ask me for 3 years, tax returns. Start working on these things. Get me this up. Whatever you think the list of stuff is, get me this. And some of it is, I need it now, and some of it is before closing.
Right.
Okay, well, estates get weird in this way because I'm a little bit soft on the one left behind. Like if it's an executor, I'm not soft on it. But if you're the wife left behind or the husband left behind, I'm a little. I always ask for proof of death, but a lot of times I'm like, what, I'm going to take this listing. I'm going to give you 2 weeks to give me proof. That way, whatever.
Right.
But at some point, and I say the title company is going to ask you for proof. And I did have one where he wasn't dead.
Right.
He wasn't dead. And we got to closing, and the closing company said, well, we ran it, and there is no death on this person. And I said, the closing, how do you run? Because I didn't know how to run a death at that point. So, all right, that wasn't my fraud. I was told this was the information I had. If she claims it's an estate, I included that little blurb at the bottom, the state, file this, file that. I always look at it as I might be wrong, but I want to be able to justify to a judge why I was reasonably relying on facts presented at the time. So do I want the estate's death certificates? Absolutely. But, oh, gee, I'm here and they're in Oregon or whatever. Okay, fine, I'll give you some time. We'll wing it. Because what's the real damage? We take a listing agreement, we take a contract of sale with a buyer, and I tell the other side, listen, I don't have the estate documents yet. Don't start anything. Give yourself 25 days on inspection instead of 15. Don't do anything until I get this figured out. And we just push it all back.
Right.
So because there's always different reasons why, state attorneys aren't done yet, or whatever. So you always prepare them for what they're going to need to do. And you also prepare, and I'm sure you've done this 100 times, are you coming to closing? Or are you doing this electronically? Do you have power of attorney? Or whatever? Who's doing the actual thing? Because you have certain things that have to be notarized. And then I just did one where I had both executors sign. It was one property held by 2 estates, 2 brothers, whatever. And no one bothered to mention to me, and I guess I must have forgotten to ask, we're both executors in Northeast PA. Well, one of them was in Florida. So I had 2 problems, and I found this out about halfway through the closing process. I then not only had to get, how am I getting the documents to Florida to get notarized? But what I didn't see coming was that Florida has a whole different process authorizing the wife to sign on her dead husband's behalf. So we're like a week out from closing, and she'd sold 8 other properties from his estate, none of which apparently had to go through this. There was no actual estate file. But because this property, all those were single owner, and so they just flowed to her. Because this was dual, Florida had a whole big cork load of stuff. And so we had to push everything back by like 3 weeks, and it was a complete dance because I didn't know Florida law. And she didn't bother to tell me that she did know Florida law, and she did know all this was required. And I actually had to go back and point to the emails. Did I ask, is there anything else that I should know about how Florida handles this? No, it all passes through me. Okay. And that's where everything by email, everything by text. If we have a conversation, we text. So I mean, you do want to find that out. And if you're dealing with, we just signed a wholesale agreement now where I'm talking, and this is either Arab or somewhere from that culture, which happens a lot. And it happens a lot of cultures, but especially in that culture, where I'm talking to the wife. She does everything.
Yep.
But
Yep.
Technically, the wife doesn't do anything.
Yeah, she's not on anything.
Or like in the Indians, it's the reverse. I talk to Roger, but Jashwita, whatever it is, she signs it. For these guys, it's the other way around. It's okay, well, guess what? And the husband owns everything. I said, that's wonderful. I said, we're going to do a 4-way. She's like, do a 3-way text. I said, no, we're doing a 4-way text. Me, Brian, you, and your husband. And everything can be discussed in the text message. So when you're reviewing it all and I'm getting a signature from him on the email you gave me, I'm sure, at least as sure as I can be. And, with that and with having with him, I got him on the phone. Like at a certain point, you're like, okay, this is okay enough. We'll let the title company take the official lead.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously more is better. But you know what? In the case of Doctor and his wife, I never talked to Doctor. I did everything by text. It could have been his wife answering.
Right.
But because there were 2 other partners, and they, at a certain point, I said, this is okay enough. It's like I can't force the man. It's like a heart surgeon. What am I gonna do? So at a certain point, and you're in the business long enough, at a certain point it becomes okay. We're okay enough. We're safe enough. Realizing that title ain't letting it happen anyway.
Yeah.
And in their case, I realized that John Rogers was their attorney, and every transaction went through John. So A, an attorney is covering my butt, and B, I know John. And John, it's not like some fly-by-night attorney.
Yeah.
So kind of a longer answer than you thought, but yeah, you want the backup, but sometimes you're like, this is okay enough for now.
Yeah, because I want to, when I actually start listing, I understand the stresses on the title end, and
Yeah.
I want to be able to just get everything to them and have them, because there's situations where if you want something to close sooner, if you're good with them, you help them out, like they're gonna put you ahead of other people. That's just how it goes. So
Well, and also, that's also why and I don't know if you've ever seen, you guys probably have something like a paperless pipeline for your document flow, right? Where all the documents go in.
yeah.
So with paperless pipeline, you can give, which I'll show you that's a whole different thing, but you can give certain parties access to certain things.
Mhm.
There's a seller permission, there's a buyer permission, a seller broker permission, buyer broker permission, title permission. So by setting your documents up right, setting all your deadlines, putting everyone's emails in here, then if title wants to see, title sees a listing agreement, and they can't find the email where you're going to email to them,
Mhm.
but they can log in here.
Mhm.
It's all there. So and listen, that's exactly what we want. We want to make sure we line everything up as much as possible.